cloud, and then also to record here. Okay, we'll start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Welcome. So our last Parsha class until the beginning of March. I'm coming home hopefully the night before our class. We're getting home like I think Wednesday evening, and I should be fine, God willing, for teaching on Thursday. That's what my hope is. But I'll send out emails. I will have our laptop with us. I'll send out information to all of you and to send the Zoom link to you as well. So before we start, I just want to also say just thank you again for joining me. I just really appreciate it. And the month of Adar is one where we are supposed to increase our joy and happiness and feel more expansive by it. And so you all do that for me, and just getting to see your faces each week and to learn with you and to share ideas with you is just very inspiring personally for me. So thank you. I really appreciate it. The first thing I want to start off with is something a little bit that I discussed on Tuesday. So for people who were with me, but bears repeating. So it's going just to be a condensed form because mostly we're going to focus on the Parsha of Truma. But we want to talk about the fact that we are now in the month of Adar, which we had a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, and today now is the second day of Adar. And in the Talmud it says, Misha nichnas Adar marbim b'simcha, that when Adar comes in, simcha increases. And the simcha that increases doesn't mean that we have more things that are going to make us happy, but that we are happier with the things we have. Because it says in Pirkei Avot, Ezehu Ashir, who is the person who is wealthy? Hasameach b'chelko, the person who is happy with that which they have, their portion. So that simcha is a choice because we get to choose how happy we're going to be and how satisfied we're going to be. It is not based on external circumstances. So that is very heartening to me that we don't have to wait for, to win the lottery in order to be happy. In fact, one can still be happy with bad news going around personally or in the community or in the world. So the month of Adar is for about a sense of expansiveness and happiness. There's a statement in the Talmud that says, a person who hears good news, something happy for themselves, that their bones grow. That literally goes down into the very essence of who we are, that it expands us. And when we are operating from a state of expansiveness, not only do we feel happier, but we're actually more productive. And we have the energy, and all of our resources and faculties are on like a heightened place to deal with whatever challenges we do have. Happiness are the shock absorbers with which we travel through life. They're not the destination that we hope to get to someday. So the shock absorbers of happiness are what allow our vehicle to navigate the terrain of challenges and bumps, which are going to be there no matter what. But, I always wondered, I don't know what made me think of this. In an office in the olden days when people worked in an office and they would have a place where there was the coffee and people would walk down the hall with their coffee. Well, I was never really able to do that. I couldn't walk down the hall without sloshing my coffee. It didn't matter. And everyone else was walking like, what is the problem? So I actually figured out, because someone told me, you're walking too slowly, that when you walk quickly, that it equalizes the slosh. When you walk slowly, it goes like this and like that. When you walk quickly, it actually will stay fine. Anyway, just a note in case you're walking down the hall with coffee, that works. But when you see advertisements for cars or vehicles that have good shock absorbers or they have a smooth ride, they may still be going over very rough terrain, but the people inside don't feel it the same way. So that's the simcha that we are cultivating during the month of Adar. And that simcha, that the word simcha has two connections for us to remember. One is that the same letters for simcha are the letters for chamisha, which means 5. Like chamisha chumshei Torah, the chumash, which is based on the 5 books of Moses, are our 5 senses. And that God has given us a world to enjoy through what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, and what we touch. And we're supposed to use all of our senses to help ourselves have a happier, more joyful experience no matter what we're doing. So I think I was thinking about that last night. I'm like, you know what? I just feel like hot chocolate. I had like one little package from a Shalach Manas, and I'm like, hot chocolate, that's what's going to do it. And so, with just 6 ounces, and then I was ready to go for the rest of the evening. So we're supposed to cultivate our sensory experience. That's part of our spiritual path. It's not separate from. We're not Buddhists. We're not ascetics. We are physical beings we are spiritual beings in a physical body, and we're supposed to use our bodies to help our spiritual experience be enhanced. In addition, the word simcha can be broken up into 2 words, sham, moach. So, I'm sorry, sameach. Sham, moach. There, sham is there, moach is in the mind. It says the place of happiness. It says people are always looking for a place of happiness, and they don't know that the city of, I think the phrase goes like this: people are looking for the city of happiness, but they don't know that it's in the state of mind. So it says we're looking for the city of happiness, but it really is in the state of mind. And putting ourselves in that place of simcha. So we are in the month of Adar. We're going to have 2 months of extra happiness, of expansiveness, and that's what we are aiming to cultivate and experience. And we are supposed to use our physical bodies. It's interesting that the Western world really is not, what can I say? It has a weird approach to the body. It's a love-hate relationship with the body. It's from Christianity, it's like, the body, source of sin, or the opposite, you just like totally give into it and do whatever you want. So it has a very kind of love-hate relationship with it. Judaism has a very integrated approach to the body. It says the body has been given to us as a tool to help our spiritual growth. And so we're supposed to use it and use it wisely. So that's our goal. Speaking of our bodies, we are now going to enter a series of parshas, which many people find extremely boring. Boring, starting with Parsha of Truma. After so much drama with Moses in Egypt, the Jewish people, the enslavement, the Exodus, the splitting of the sea, standing at Mount Sinai, it's like all drama. Now, on one hand, you can't really have a life that just like is all having these series of peak experiences. Then you have to come down to real life. It started a little bit in Mishpatim, where we talked about the laws and how we're supposed to navigate our relationships with other people. There are all the laws of damages, relationships, our animals, our property, all of those things were in Mishpatim. And then we come kind of out of nowhere into Parsha Truma. So Parsha Truma, which begins on page 445, and it is chapter 25, verse 1, if you don't have the art scroll. And it opens up by saying, Hashem spoke to Moses saying, speak to the children of Israel and let them take from me a portion. From every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion. And from that portion, if you have the art scroll, you can see in the margin, it says, the tabernacle, a resting place for God's presence. And then it's going to be, what is this portion? Gold, silver, copper, turquoise, purple, scarlet wool, linen, goat hair, red dyed ram skins, tachash skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for the anointment oil, and aromatic incense, shoham stones and stones for the settings, for the ephod and the breastplate. And then the key sentence, they shall make a sanctuary for me, so that I may dwell among them. One of the most important verses in the entire Torah is, V'asuli mikdash, you shall make me a place of holiness, V'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell in amongst you, not in the Mishkan, but in you. You make me a mikdash and I will dwell in you. So that is what we're going to explore. So first we're going to ask the question, why are there so many parshas? There's the Parsha of Truma, and then it's going to continue next week with the Parsha of Tetzaveh. And then after Tetzaveh, it's going to go into Kitisa. And then it's going to go into Vayakel and Pekudei. And then it's going to be the end of the book of Exodus. It's like, seriously, we're going to talk about the Mishkan for all of this time. Why are we talking about it so much? So we have to ask the question, if the Torah is giving so much, so many column inches to the Mishkan, one would have to draw the conclusion that it must be important. But there are other things that are important. There's Shabbos, there's honoring your parents, there's not stealing, there's all the 10 commandments, there's all those things that we talked about. How come they don't have so many column inches devoted to them? We went through Mishpatim, there were 53 mitzvahs in one parsha, but it was one parsha. The 10 commandments were one paragraph. The things that we think of as being key and central to our lives as Jewish people, if somebody were to stop you on the street and say, what are the 10 most significant things about your life as a Jewish person? I can guarantee you that nobody is going to say, well, top among that is the Mishkan. They're going to say, love God, be a good person, keep Shabbos, give tzedakah, honor your parents, be nice to people. That's what people are going to say. Nobody is going to say the Mishkan. So why is God saying yes and yes and yes and yes? But what I really want you to focus on, and I'm going to give you a whole lot of parshas about this, I want you to focus on the Mishkan, which, by the way, we don't even have anymore, and nobody's rebuilding. So you're telling me that every single year we're going to bring out the architectural plans for the Mishkan and we're going to read over it? As the rabbi who was sharing the class spoke about when saying this, Rabbi Gladstein, he was saying, do you do that in your home? Do you every year take out your blueprints for your house, or you go over your receipts from Home Depot of all the supplies you bought to build it, and you call up your contractor and say, I just want to talk about my house again. I just want to talk about like how we built this. Be like, you need to get a life. Okay, that would be like, you might need to go visit Daisy if you have that kind of a challenge in your life of like, why are you focusing on that? So here we are reading something over and over and over again that nobody is ever building again, that we don't use, and of all the things in the Torah seems to be the most obsolete. So clearly, all these rhetorical questions are to tell us that can't possibly be true. It must be that the Mishkan means something that we haven't tapped into. Now, sometimes in some years, we have kind of gone around it a little bit, and we have focused on certain pieces. But I'd like to set the stage for the whole thing. What is the Mishkan? Why is so much focused on it? So we take the sentences, Asuli Mikdash, you make for me a Mikdash, and I will dwell in you. I will dwell amongst you. It says, what is the Mishkan? The Mishkan is us as individuals. It says, what is the most important thing to God? The most important thing to God is that God has a relationship with us. We are the key piece. Everything else is great, but it hinges on the relationship we have with ourselves and knowing how important and valuable we are. So what God is kind of saying, I'm putting words in God's mouth. The reason the Mishkan is so important to me is that it is a direct metaphor for how important you, human beings, are to me. You are the most important thing to me. And the Mishkan is a metaphor. The construction of the Mishkan is a metaphor for the construction of you. And that's why it's so important. It's a review of you. It's not a review of a building. So yes, it was a building. And yes, it existed for hundreds of years. And we're going to go to Shiloh on our women's trip. And we're going to go see where the Mishkan stood for almost 400 years. It was incredible. But we don't have it. But it was a symbol of everything that has to do with us. So what does that mean? So let's take a look at it. And so if you have a piece of paper and want to draw this out, you can, just to think about, or you can just kind of have it in your mind. Asuli Mikdash, make for me a holy place. What is God telling me? if I'm taking it outside of the building, it says, make yourself holy so that I can live with you. I want to be close to you and connected to you. Now, sometimes people make a mistake and they say, you know, there's really not God out there. God is in me. That's not what we're talking about. There is God, and God wants to be in me. Both are true. That God wants to have a dwelling place in me. So how do I make myself a place where God would want to be? Never mind the fancy building. Me. How do I make myself into a person that God would feel comfortable hanging around with and being literally inside of me? It needs to be Kodesh. It needs to be holy because I am holy. I, God, am holy. So what does that mean to be a holy person? So now we're going to take the construction of the Mishkan, and we're going to use it as a map, as a metaphor for ourselves. So when you think about the Mishkan, if you've heard about it before, what's the most important place within the Mishkan? Does anybody know, like, what's the place that's considered the most important place within the Mishkan?
Kadoshim.
Very good. The Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies. It says, what is the Holy of Holies? It says, the Holy of Holies is the human mind. That's our mind. That's our inner sanctum. That's what we protect the most. And when we ask ourselves the question, would I bring this into the Holy of Holies? Could answer a lot of questions about what we bring into our minds. When somebody says, I'm just watching it, I'm just reading it, I'm just looking at it, it's not affecting me, the answer to each of those statements is not true, not true, not true. If you would bring that book, that language, that movie, that whatever, if you would want that going on in the Holy of Holies, then it's probably okay. But that's the question we ask. We don't take ourselves seriously enough. We don't take our Holy of Holies seriously enough. Now, this is going to be really politically incorrect, and it's going to be more politically incorrect because it's not even on the list of other political incorrectness. People like to read novels. People like to watch movies. And they think, or it doesn't have to be novels or movies, it can be any kind of thing that's considered to be an external experience. I'm just reading it. It's not my life. I find it interesting, it's entertaining, it's whatever. The answer is it's very often polluting. Because if you would take whatever it is you're reading has a reality to it, it's not simple words on a page. If you were to have whatever scene you are reading, if it were unfolding in front of your eyes and it was with you in the Holy of Holies, the question we have to ask ourselves is that a good idea? There is no such thing as a true external experience that doesn't affect our minds. Everything is recorded. Everything is recorded. And it becomes part of our reality. So now people don't like to hear this. They're like, that's censorship, that's being narrow-minded, that's being whatever. It's like, you bet it's being narrow-minded. What does narrow-minded really mean? I have a narrow entrance through which I guard what goes in there. And I'm not bringing garbage in because I'm bringing it into the Holy of Holies. So really, we are supposed to give some serious thought of what is going into my mind. And that is going to be a huge thing because we live in a world today where just about anything and everything can go into our mind. It used to be if you wanted something smutty, you had to go out of your house and you had to go someplace to go experience that. Now you don't. You can just watch it on your screen, read about it in a book. It's really, and the language that we use around this, I don't know where we were driving. Where were we? Oh, I think it was in Florida when we were there. We drove past a place and it was like a strip place, not a strip mall, like a strip place, strippers. And the sign on it was like this very fancy font said Gentlemen's Club. I'm like, gentlemen? No, you just call it Testosterone Palace. You call it whatever you want. It's not a gentleman's club. That's not what gentlemen do. So we have like all of this code language that we use in euphemism. Like, oh, it's just a novel, just a book. It's not me. It's not about anything. It's like, yes, it is. It's going into our minds. Our mind is a Kodesh Kadoshim. Our mind is a Holy of Holies. This is reinforced by the head plate that was on the Kohen Gadol's head. That when he went into the Holy of Holies, what did he wear? Go back. It's going to be in another Parsha of Truma. It is. Let's see if I have a picture of it. Yeah, page 473 in the Art Scroll Chumash. I can hold it up for you on the screen here. I don't know if you'd be able to see it. This is what goes on top of the head, and it says Kodesh Lashem, holy to God. And where is it placed? It is placed on his forehead. Holy to God. My head is a holy place. Now, people come up with all sorts of things. It's interesting. It's entertaining. It helps me understand people. It's like, you know, unless you are supposed to be getting a degree in something where you need to understand bizarre behavior or things that are inappropriate, it has no business in our minds.
So,
business. Ellyn.
So if the mind is not the place to go you know, or get a lot of that out of your mind, you know, when you said that, what's the most important place to me almost, I think it's the heart. And so if you go in there with your heart, it could be a very different experience or a different way of looking at things. I'm wondering
tell me what you mean by your heart.
Well, you know, well, maybe the heart and the mind, because I'm thinking of morality and being ethical and those kinds of things. But I think also the heart with thinking that it can expand with, you know, with your experiences, it can expand with your families, expand with your love, it expand and does things so that it becomes, and it's very different than having your mind, because your mind, you know, takes over and you got the ego and all this other stuff that we got, you know, but the heart doesn't really have that. And I think almost the heart can talk to you in a different way, in a different experience than what the mind is. Because yes, we get other things from it, but maybe the heart can see through a lot of that bad that, you know, or other things that we do, you know, that we experience. It's just a different way of interpreting things or learning things, or maybe it's more intuitive, maybe it's just how you feel. It just kind of has a different feeling for me than the mind. And I understand, you know, I like it to say the heart more than the head, you know, because we get all that junk in our heads, where I think our heart can understand it better.
Yes and no. So I'm going to come back and so some of this can be semantics. So I'll just say that some of this is semantics and definitions of terms. When we talk about the mind, we're talking about the brain and the mind, which processes all information. Okay, so thoughts are created in the mind, and then the heart is the emotional response to those thoughts.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So the brain is the command center, which is why if you have a brain injury, you're in big trouble. Okay, because it's going to affect everything.
Yeah, okay.
There's going to be a disconnect there. So it says everything that's up here above the neck is your critical command center, and is going to influence, it's going to trickle down then into your feelings. The brain, so some people have like a negative association with the brain, like the mind, and assign the ego to the mind. The ego is not, the ego and the mind are not the same thing. Okay, so the brain takes in all information, and you don't get to choose the impact the information has on you. Or whether, I shouldn't say that, you do. You don't get to choose whether the information is there. That's why people can suffer from trauma. Wouldn't you just say, well, I don't really want to think about that, so I'm then taking that out? It's like, no, you don't get to do that. You can process it, you can manage it, you can do something with it, but you don't get to choose whether it's there or not. So every experience it's in there. It is in there. So when they talk about with childhood, be very careful. The age has been up until 3 years old. Those initial things, even things that we don't remember. I don't remember that happened to me. It is still in there and it's still impacting us. When I get together with my sister and she tells me like things that she remembers from our childhood, I have like no recollection. She goes, Ellyn, I can't believe you don't remember when mom did blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nope. But she goes, you were there. So it's in there. It is in there. And our goal is to keep it as pure as possible. So when we talk about the heart, so I'm trying to understand a little bit more, Helene, about what you're saying about our experiences. We're talking about the difference between an experience I actually have and something that I read about or something that I watch a movie about. Our brain actually doesn't know the difference between those things, which is why if you read a scary book and you're sitting safely in your house, you can break out in a cold sweat. You ever notice that? That's why movies work. That's why people read, is because it does go into your head and your mind doesn't actually know the difference. It actually doesn't know the difference. And that's why why do people look at pornography? Because they have a sexual response to looking at something as if it were really happening. That's the beauty and the curse of the human being, is whatever we expose ourselves to, our brain does not have a, you know what, that really wasn't real. Why do I close my eyes at a scary movie? As if that's like, what does that do? You know, you hear the music, na, na, na. I'm like, I'm sitting safely, hopefully safely in a theater. Don't I know that? Doesn't my brain know that, Ellyn, you're sitting in a theater eating popcorn? Like, what is your problem? That's not how we function.
Yeah.
So we need to know that everything we choose to put in, now, obviously things happen to us and then we can process them and we can take that out and we can rename it. We can put it in a bigger framework, but there's nothing that says, you know what, we're just going to take that out. There's not a take out. There is a work with. But when we put in things that are indecent, immoral, unethical, inappropriate for somebody who is a holy being, which is what these 4 parshas are telling us, 5 parshas, you are holy. I want to live with you. You need to be careful in this world. And I'm going to show you a model. So it says that that God showed Moshe, he says, I'm not going to show you the Mishkan, show it to you. It says, I'm going to show you I'm going to show you this model of who you are as a person. And we're going to start with the Holy of Holies, your brain, your mind. And then it's going and says, and there's a curtain there. There's a curtain with the Holy of Holies. It says, you only let certain things in. And that's not being narrow-minded in a bad way. That's called being prudent. That's called being careful. That's called being holy.
In that respect, if you look at it, I've had a friend back in Baltimore, Hasidim, and her husband, more than her, doesn't know what a TV is, doesn't know what a movie is, doesn't know any of those things. He knows what God is, well, we think, you know, and Torah and all that is.
That's right.
And, you know, you go, well, how come he doesn't know the Beatles? He had no idea who the Beatles were, you know. That's how he lived in that little, in a contain, whatever we want to call it. For me, I you know, it's hard to live like that, or I would be able to live like that. You know, you have so much things going on, and people go, how do you do that? You have to put yourself in a completely different place in order to do that. And what you're saying, I understand. Would be extremely I don't know what it was. I don't extreme something. A way
So
of life.
so it's funny, we consider that extreme, and that's
Yeah.
only because it's because of the society we live in.
Well, of
And
course.
can I tell you that not so long ago, that was not extreme at all. That,
Yeah.
you know, this is new. This is new. And even just, I'm just gonna say, use your body language when you say there's like so much going on around us. Exactly. There's so much going on around us, and a person can choose to be judicious about what they let into their mind. And there's another reason too, which is that there is, this is an economics term, that there is opportunity cost. That when we are putting one thing in our mind, there is not only whatever the damaging effects are of what we're putting into our mind, but whatever time we are spending doing that is at the expense. I'm not saying somebody has to be reading, you know, physics books all day long. I'm not talking about that. But people need inspiration. People need something that helps them understand themselves. People need to find ways to relate to other people in real meaningful ways. In a way, it's a fake thing. If you read a story about some really sad situation and it gets you like, oh my gosh, this poor person like this and blah, blah, blah. There is almost I'm gonna call it a counterfeit experience that you actually learn something and help somebody. It's like, did you really learn something and help somebody? That's me like watching the design shows thinking that I'm actually learning how to be a designer. Okay, so like that's not really happening. So we have like it's almost an artificial experience, and we're finding this very, very sadly. People now with the technology, they would rather have an artificial experience than a real experience, because a real experience is a lot messier and they're really involved. They'd rather talk to their pets or they would rather be online. And it's like, that is much easier than actual real life. So when we have this artificial, now these are generalizations. I'm not saying like every fiction book out there or every whatever out there is like we shouldn't do. But I'm saying we need to exercise more caution about what we're doing when we think that we're not impacted. This is a holy of holies. Your brain, you know, there's scientific studies that talk about this. They talk about people who see movies about aggressive behavior and then how they act afterwards. They've shown there is a correlation. And the contrary, that if they see a movie or a film about generous behavior, whatever, this is why in the old time United Way campaigns, that they would show tear-jerker movies to people while they were doing their fundraising to get people to make donations, because what you see matters. It has an impact. So all of these things are true, and we don't get to choose, okay, this is going to have an impact on me and this isn't going to have an impact on me. We do not get to make that choice. So we're supposed to say, I want to be really careful about what I see. It also, interestingly, it increases sensitivity to not be bombarded. It increases sensitivity to not be bombarded. Because what happens is we see so much and we see things that are so awful or so whatever, we become desensitized because our brain is like, I can't take it. I can't respond to it. So my little niece, Bracha Kurtzer, when she lived in Denver, their family did not have a TV. And she was over at a friend's house where there was a TV that was on. And she saw some report about a fire. And she came home crying to my sister saying, I saw there was a fire. Like, what are we going to do when these people don't have a house? And like, what can we do? And my sister was like, you know, it's just the news, you know, and it wasn't like the fire like we just had a few weeks ago. It was not that, no, I mean, I had a little fire in my kitchen and for me, it was terrible. So any fire, but we don't react. It's like, oh, that's such a shame. Next. So we are overloading ourselves with all sorts of things. We are actually deadening our ability to respond to it because it's too much, and it's polluting the environment. It's like, you know, people are talking about how can you in your physical environment, decluttering, get rid of things that don't spark joy, right? Marie Kondo, get rid of things that don't spark joy. That's your physical environment. How about your brain? How about your mind? What you see, what you hear, what you are doing. That's the biggest decluttering of all to go through. The Kodesh Kadoshim was very Spartan in what was in there. And what was in there was the Ark, okay, with the commandments in there, and the Torah, the man, just to remember that that God was providing manna for the Jewish people for the 40 years. It was a very intense, focused place. That's what our mind should be. We're also seeing, teachers are seeing this. Kids can't even focus now for more than, I don't know what, 2 minutes. They have become entertainers. A teacher has to be able to present things in a very fast way. Do you ever go back and look at shows that we watched like in the 60s? They are so ploddingly slow. It just about makes you want to plot. It's like, who could watch a show like this? Like nothing's happening. They need like all things going on all the time because people can't even concentrate. A mind is our most precious resource. It is meant to be a Kodesh Kadoshim. And Helene, when you said it's hard, you're right, because our environment surrounds us. So my husband's studied with Rabbi Shlomi Abraham when he was in Denver. He still learns with him on the phone. And he's very careful. He was always very careful. He wears glasses. He has a very, very nearsighted. So he said when he would go into the store, when you go to check out, all of the yucky magazines and everything that is there. I'm not talking about Playboy. I'm talking about National Enquirer, all these other things that are about all these yucky things that people are doing. He took off his glasses to stand in line. It's like, okay, I have to pay for my groceries, but I don't have to, I can try to not see what I'm seeing.
Social media, Facebook, all those things. I don't even want to go there. I mean, I don't like it.
It's
insane.
It's insane. And so we are the Kohen Gadol. It says, who goes into the Holy of Holies? The Kohen Gadol, the high priest. It says, who's our high priest? Me. So God is saying, I'm showing you who's in charge of the Holy of Holies. You are. I cannot make that decision for you. I can only show you a model of what it looks like and what you're aiming for. That's your Holy of Holies. And it's divided and there's a curtain. So just like in the brain, there's the meningia or something, whatever, the hole that separates things out. It says, and then it goes to the rest of the Mishkan. The next part is the rest of the face. It says, what's the face? So the other things that are in there, in the holy, not the Holy of Holies, but the next holiest parts, dropping down from the brain, are the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So what are those? So it says that they have 2 eyes, and the 2 eyes, one eye is the menorah, and one eye is the shulchan, is the table that had the 12 loaves of bread. It's like, those are my eyes. What am I supposed to learn from that? So it says that the eyes, the eye that is the menorah is about illumination and wisdom of what is that I want to focus on. The menorah had 7 branches which are connected to the 7 wisdoms of the world. And these are not exclusively Jewish. So it's 7 wisdoms, and I had a list of them, but there are like math, medicine, architecture, astronomy, music, and I forget what the other ones were, but they were things that you would think of like when you go to, I don't know, a person who's well educated, who knows those things, that tell about how the world works. It says those wisdoms illuminate people's minds and have the potential to make them very happy, because this is the realm where we make, in psychology, also psychology, the discovery of human emotions, this discovery of the world around us. That's what we were supposed to fill our lives with. So it's interesting. Again, this isn't me. I'm not at this level, but there are people who are ordinary people who, sometimes you go into people's bathrooms. So we know you can't bring a holy book into the bathroom. You cannot, you cannot bring your Siddur in there. You can't bring the Torah in there, but you do need to go to the bathroom. So you do need to sometimes spend time in there. So the question is, so what should you be thinking about in there? So there are people who in their bathrooms, instead of having kind of joke books or, who knows what that people have in there, they have books on science, math, astronomy. It's like, okay, if you need to be in there and you need to spend some time, then think about the world. You're there, you're taking care of your body. Look at something about physiology. Look about something about the miraculous nature of the human eye or the heart. Do something interesting. It says that's way more rewarding than reading some stupid jokes or Reader's Digest. It's like, again, it doesn't mean you have to become an astronomer or do any of these things, but like, if you're in a place that's not the holiest of holiest places, take in something that's interesting and that will give you some wisdom and it will be inspiring to you. I remember I was doing some research, it was for a retreat about spiders. Now, I hate spiders, but I forgot what kind of spider it was. This was already a few years ago. There's a spider that what they make their web out of is the strongest fiber that exists in creation, and they are using it for like warfare garments because it's light and the strength of it per square inch or whatever is beyond anything that exists in the world. Like, that's really fascinating. That makes me happy. So learning things like that is like, take responsibility. You are the Kohen Gadol. Your eyes, the 7 wisdoms of the menorah, illuminate yourself. Illuminate yourself. That's why we're here. That's why we are here. The shulchan, which is the bread, it says, what is that for? What's our eye there for that? It says, that is how we look at other people. It says that this is the place where, because we've heard there's a word that's called to be narrow-eyed. Does anybody know what that means? Narrow-eyed? Sarut ayin, narrow-eyed.
Critical.
Okay, so yes, it can be critical. It can be very critical, and it is also considered to be stingy. Okay, to be stingy and to begrudge other people what they have. Because it's like, they kind of like, just think about it. When somebody's like up to no good against someone else, they kind of looked at me like, that's not a good look. If somebody's looking at you like that, they're not your friend, at least at that moment, okay? That's being narrow-eyed. It's critical of other people. It is wishing other people ill, usually from a place of, so this is where this would come into Helene. This is actually your idea about the ego, of jealousy, about like, how come they got that? And that's what people do. It's a natural reaction. If someone says, how come they got that? If you see the look on the face, I wouldn't even have to hear the words that you're saying. I could tell by your eyes that you are narrow-eyed. Why did they get that? It says the shulchan, which is about sustenance, of God sustaining everybody all the time. There is always fresh bread. It says this was like to look to other people from a place of abundance and generosity of spirit.
I would also think of bread as being what we put in our bodies and what we nourish ourselves, and that certainly leads to good things too, if we do it properly, of course.
Okay, so actually that's going to be holding off till the altar. That's where the altar is about the actual consumption. So yes, you're right about bread. That's a great metaphor. And really, however this kind of works for you, there's like, 70 faces of the Torah. There's many ways of understanding this. This is the one that has to do with, because you think about what human beings fight about, either openly or subtly. It is about that they are not getting enough of they're not getting the salary they wanted. They didn't get the job they wanted. Somebody else got the promotion. Somebody else has a bigger house. Somebody else has better children. Somebody else has bigger this. That's called sarut ayin, to be like narrow-eyed, looking at other people instead of saying, look, there's 12 fresh loaves. There's plenty. God has provided the world with everything. I'm coming from a place of generosity. It's interesting that we will get to in Vayikra of the different offerings. So there is the Thanksgiving offering that is given, and that required a person to bring 40 loaves of bread with them. Now, if you have 40 loaves of bread with you, and it had to all be eaten in one day, maybe overnight and the next day or something, but 40 loaves of bread, by definition, you need to invite other people to help you eat that bread, because there's no way that you can consume that. So God puts it into the Torah. You must have 40 loaves. It's like, what am I supposed to do with that? It's like, well, what do you think you should do with that? If God gives you plenty, then what do you do with that? You share. So not only was it to publicize then whatever God had done for you, because it was the Thanksgiving offering, and so you should share with other people. But when we look at what we have from a place of, I've got 40 loaves of bread. I've got a table full. I have what our patriarchs each said, yesh li kol. I have everything, which means that I can be giving and generous and not narrow-eyed toward other people. These are our eyes. Learning from the wisdom of the world and what I see about the world that God has created, and how I see other people. Those are my eyes. The next is the nose. The nose is, it says it was the incense. Okay, the incense was literally the smell of that. It said that the smell was divine. And what was the incense for? It says the incense was to be the antidote to speaking Lashon Hara. It says like to have a good smell. It's like the air freshener of like, let's make everything smell nice. It says like, that would be like how we talk about other people. Now you would think that maybe was the mouth, but it actually is the nose of how we think other people smell. And I don't mean deodorant wise. I mean like that we are attributing a pleasant fragrance to other people of their behavior. So the incense was an antidote to Lashon Hara. And then we get to the altar that was for the animal offerings. And that's the mouth. And that is what goes in your mouth. Now, the nose was actually about what comes out of your mouth as far as Lashon Hara, but the altar is about what goes into your mouth. Your food should be healthy. It should be kosher. It should be appropriate. It should be holy. It says this is also not just about, oh, I ate like a pig, but the food was all kosher. This was about how we eat and what we eat, and even when we eat. So it says that it was done on a schedule. It says that's how we want to face the world. It says, so people, if you can see, your face is the Mishkan, and then the rest of the Mishkan has the rest of it. It has the planks, which are the bones. It has the skins, which are our skin. It has all of these different pieces. In fact, somebody counted up, went through all the parshas to figure out how many items, like literally if you were going to do it from Home Depot and you made a list of how many different things are mentioned and their quantities. And I had never heard this before. There's 613. There are 613, which is the map of the human body. It says the human being is, if you say, go into the blessing for healing, for somebody that we say a Misha Berach, and it's in the davening, it'll say for the 248 limbs and organs and for this 365 sinews, whatever that means. This is not going to be in your medical textbook, but it says the body itself is a manifestation of all 613 commandments, as is the Mishkan. The Mishkan is the human body, the human being. And what God is laying out for us is a map for how to be a successful person, to be a holy person with whom God wants to keep company and have an intimate relationship. So when we look at then, and we have that in mind, and we kind of project forward, not from the Mishkan, but to the temples, to the Beit HaMikdash. Why were the temples destroyed? So you can look at it politically. Well, it was the Babylonians, it was the Romans. Like, that's not how we look at it. It was destroyed because we had self-destructed as a people, and therefore the building no longer could stand. Which is why we take those days of destruction of the month of Av to focus on how we can improve and rebuild. But we don't say, okay, now what we need to do is kick the Arabs off of the Harabait and go build the temple. It's like, that's not going to build it. I mean, politically, that sounds very satisfying, but that's not what's going to build it. It cannot be built until it is built by each of us. Each one of us is a piece of that Beit HaMikdash. And the Beit HaMikdash can only be as strong as the individuals who it reflects. I think I shared this before, but I would love to see, because they can do all these beautiful light shows in Yerushalayim. They're just amazing. I would love to see a projection on the Kotel, since that's the only wall we have. I would love to see a projection, even though that's just a retaining wall for the Har Bayit, and it's not even a wall of the temple, but it's as close as we can get. I would love to see faces projected on each one of those stones. I would love to see people see this building is no more and no less than the quality of the people who want it to exist. That's what it is. So these 4 parshas, or 5 parshas about the Mishkan, intricate detail about how to be a person. And God is saying, yes, I want you to keep Shabbos. Yes, I want you to keep kosher. Yes, I want you to give tzedakah. I want you to love your neighbor as yourself, all these things. But if you don't get how important you are in the equation, it doesn't matter. So I mentioned this on Tuesday. I mentioned it again. So I'm so much thinking about this young woman, the former Miss America, Miss USA, who took her life because in her worldview, once you're over 30, society says you're not really worth so much. And I don't know, I'm sure she had other issues going on as well, but I thought she didn't read these parshas. She did not read these parshas about the importance and significance of every human being. How could you possibly devalue herself in that way? So whether somebody is actually putting out their light for one of those reasons, and I'm not talking about somebody who has clinical depression. I'm talking about somebody who has been so influenced and even in a mini version doesn't get who they are in the scheme of things. God is saying, you're the reason I created the whole world. You need to understand how important you are and how important you are to me. And don't think that just because I'm the infinite creator of the universe, that I cannot contract myself and live inside you. It's the ultimate paradox. How can the infinite creator of the universe contract and be in us? But the word infinite, we always associate infinite with big. Infinite also means infinitely small. How can it be that God is present in every molecule and cell of our body? How is that possible? I don't know, but that's what infinite means. So we want to be the people who have ourselves be the kind of people with God would want to be in our midst. So then we launched these 4 parshas. I'm sorry, we won't be here for most of them to discuss, but that's why I really wanted to talk about all of them as a concept. So I want to talk about one example of one piece that is in here, that is in this week's parsha specifically, and that is about the ark. So if you'll bear with me and give me a few extra minutes, I want to share this because I think it's so beautiful. Page 447 is a description of the ark. Now, the ark was the holiest thing in the Holy of Holies that had the 10 Commandments in it, the Torah, all of these precious things. If you were thinking, what should the ark be made out of? What should it be made out of?
Maybe gold?
Gold, right? Gold is the most precious metal, is in the Olympics, is then there, it goes gold, silver, brass, that's just how it is. Okay, gold is the most precious. It should be solid gold, except that it's not. If you take a look, and you will see that on verse 10, page 447, chapter 25, verse 10, they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, 1.5 cubits its height, and you shall cover it with pure gold. From within and without, you shall cover it, and you shall make on it a gold crown all around. You shall cast for it 4 rings of gold and place them on its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side, 2 on the other. You shall make staves of acacia wood and cover them with gold, and insert the staves and the rings on the sides of the ark with which to carry the ark. So what is this ark made out of? Is it like a pretense? Was there a shortage of gold? Why isn't it all gold? Gold is really heavy. Gold is really heavy. Now, acacia was not exactly light, but it's lighter than solid gold. So it says, God wanted it to be able to be carried by a human being. To be able to be carried by a human being. This idea is like, what does this mean? It says, God wants us to be able to carry the burdens in our life. They're covered over with gold, which means that they are precious. Everything that we experience is precious. But if it was solid gold, it would be not movable. We wouldn't be able to carry it. Because God wants us to be able to carry it. But what's very interesting is it says that there were magic properties to the ark. It says in the Midrash, it says that the ark actually carried the carriers. So what does that mean? It says they went through the motions of carrying it, but actually the ark carried them. It was so holy, it carried them. It's like, okay, so if the ark's so holy that it's going to carry me, then why does it have to have wood? So then make it as heavy as you want. It's like a, 747. Don't you wonder, how do airplanes really fly? Okay, so if something can, heaviness shouldn't matter. If you have divine flying, it shouldn't matter that it's all gold. But the message God wants to give us is, in the end, I am carrying you. And you also need to be able, and I want you to be able to put in your effort too. If it was solid gold, then you would have no role. It would only have to be flown. It would only be like the magical, miraculous. The fact that it has wood in it and that it is carryable and that you can exert effort to do it, that's how we're supposed to approach our lives. But we shouldn't worry that God's not carrying us. It's not all up to us, but we are supposed to put in the effort. So the wood on the inside says this is suitable for a human being to master, but don't worry if you're overtired, you're overworked, whatever, God is there also, and God is actually carrying you. This reminds me of the story that's talking about the boy who was walking and he was looking at his life and looking back on his life and he saw the place that there were double sets of footprints, and he says, like, God, I know you were with me because I see there's two sets of footprints, but then you abandoned me because here there's only one set of footprints. And he says, God says, that's when I was carrying you. Those are my footprints, not yours. So it says the ark is designed to remind us of the message of we're supposed to put in the work we can do. And there were staves there to carry it. However, God is carrying the whole thing. So we put in our effort, our human ability, and in the end, we don't worry that God isn't there. So all of these messages, there's so many different things. It would take a lifetime to unpack each one of these measurements, the materials, how they were designed, where they were placed. And so every year we review this. And it's not because we're bizarre people who are bringing out the architectural plans of our house and going over them with the architect and the contractor every year, because that would be really bizarre. It's because this is truly, the Mishkan is me. And to the extent that I want to understand myself as being a place where God wants to dwell with me, I will pore over these parshas and identify some new insight that helps me understand myself better. This is the rest of the book of Exodus. And you could say, like, what's it even doing here? It has nothing to do with the Exodus. It says, but that's exactly what it has to do with. The Exodus was already over, basically, the Parsha Yitro, done with it. Okay, so you get to Mount Sinai, we're done. But the truth is it's like, it's not done until you know who you are. When we know who we are, then we can actually proceed. And that is the completion of the Exodus, is the building of the Mishkan. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. It was great to see you, and I will look forward to seeing you when I, God willing, return from Israel. And I'll send you information, keep you posted about our get-together. So have a wonderful Shabbos. Anybody has any questions, feel free to stay on. Thank you for giving me extra time. I felt like I needed to have a few minutes extra since I'm going to be without you.
Have a wonderful trip.
birthday to
Safe
Audrey.
trip.
Shia Tova.
Yasher Koach.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Yasher Koach was fantastic.
Safe travels and fun
Safe
time.
Wow.
travels.
Ellen.
Yeah, so
Amen. Thank
Shia
you.
Tova.